In this video, the effect of sound on brain function and behavior patterns will be examined. Specific tests have been developed in past experiments to measure the impact of sound in regards to music. Also, both the presence of music involved in listening and playing instruments will be observed. However, the activity of brain function involved in learning and completing tasks are the subjects of interest in this focused study. The null hypothesis in this topic of research is that there is no significant correlation between music and improved brain function and behavioral patterns. Through my research and the presented past studies, I will attempt to nullify or disprove this hypothesis. To begin with, a past study was done to identify the role of music in memory, attention, and possible abilities to predict. The study showed that this function can occur in quick moments during a pause in classical music scores. Researchers chose composer William Boyce's work, which consisted of 8 symphonies for their study. This was the ideal composer for their study because a number of his symphonies included these pauses. 10 men and 8 women with no musical backgrounds in regards to playing instruments were chosen for this. Each of them were put into an MRI to be scanned for brain activity. They had to wear headphones to eliminate the surrounding sounds of the machine and to be able to focus on the music. When the music played and paused and continued, they were able to see the brain activity of the participants. What the brain scan revealed was that the right side of the brain was clearly functioning more than the left side. The functioning took place within the 10 seconds before the music and 10 seconds after the musical score was played. In this study, they found that 2 networks were being used that were the ventral frontotemporal, where the change is received, and the dorsal frontoparietal, which focuses on the change, and as the next beginning occurs, it updates the working memory. Another very interesting past study concerning brain activity in response to music as well as brain activity in response to playing musical instruments was one seen in Anita Collins' video. In this study, research was done to measure the brain's activity in response to music as it was being played. The researchers, who are neuroscientists, examined this activity in real time. They did this by using fMRIs, or functional magnetic resonance imaging, and PET, or positron emissions tomography scanners. They were focusing on the parts of the brain that were responsible for math and reading types of activities. The researchers then monitored the participants in these scanners when they played music and found that there were different areas of the brain that were being activated. They believed that they were seeing the brain's way of interpreting the incoming sound in relation to rhythm and melody and translating it into clear auditory moments. This was the data that they were able to observe and record for those participants who simply listened to the music. The study goes on to show that they monitored the brain activity of the participants who played the musical instruments, and the results were very significant. They observed through these scanners that the brain activity of those who played instruments were extremely more active than those who just listened to the music. The scanners were able to show that as the musicians played their instruments, numerous intricate patterns of neural activity was occurring at very fast rates of time. The researchers believe that playing instruments involve auditory, visual, and motor cortices in the brain. The point that they realized was that the entire brain was being used in the brains of the musicians. From this finding, they were able to entertain the idea that those who practice playing their instruments will apply the same type of functioning to the other tasks in their everyday lives. This is the growing proof, although still fairly new, that not only adds to the belief that music affects the brain function, but also provides added information that suggests playing an instrument improves brain function in a significant way. The video presentation even refers to the musician's brain activity as an equivalent to a complete body workout. In another study that can be found on the scholarly report WBUR's Commonwealth Reform and Reality, researchers sought to study the effects of listening to music and playing music in brain function. In some cases, they were trying to find correlations between playing instruments and being able to predict the reading skills in second graders when they enter the fifth grade, how they improve speech perception and emotional recognition, and improve upon the ability to multitask. The researchers explored the role of music in executive functioning of the brain. The idea that they proposed was that the brain activity involved in people who were musically trained actually contributed to the executive brain functioning that is responsible for academic activity. Again, the use of scanner machines revealed the difference between the brain activity of people who don't play instruments as opposed to those who did. The results of the scanner showed that, by comparison, there was more defined activity and greater area of functioning seen in the brain scans of people who played instruments as opposed to those who did not. One such study that was rather interesting in this concept of the effect of music on brain activity was a study done by Paola Andrade, a music teacher at Colegio Creativa, a private school located in Marília, Brazil. Andrade's study was concerned with musical relationship skills dealing with language and literacy in elementary school students. He developed an experiment to see if such a connection could be made. Andrade made a set of musical tasks for the students in his class to complete that dealt with identifying sound. He instructed his students to either make a line or a circle after he played certain types of chord progressions on his guitar. A line was to be made if the pitch was at a high register, and a circle if it was at a lower register. These markings were to be done by the students after a brief pause that followed him playing the chord progressions. Andrade observed that there were students that were really struggling with this task, but to his surprise, these were the same students who were struggling with reading and writing. They believed that this information could help them predict the literacy ability of these students when they entered fifth grade. In this section of the video, I will discuss my personal research. There were actually 3 experiments that were recorded and challenged the Null Hypothesis in the beginning of this video, but one will be discussed here. This study was done in the year 2008 to 2010 when I was employed at a public school as an after-school teacher. The general function of the job was to provide enrichment activities for the students until their parents picked them up at a certain hour. I worked with elementary school kids, specifically 3rd graders. The majority of the kids were 8 years old, and they were considered underprivileged. They were also labeled as problem students because they had problems focusing on their given assignments, and they would also disrupt the class on a daily basis because of this. There were 12 children that I was responsible for. There were 7 girls and 5 boys in this class. Now, before this class would begin, I noticed that it would take a ridiculous amount of time to get the kids to calm down, roughly 20 minutes. Even when I did manage to get them to quiet down, they would soon return to the same unruly behavior. Sometimes the behavior never ended from the time they entered the room. One day, I decided to change rooms to see if that would make a difference. This did make a difference for about 20 minutes from the time they entered the new classroom, and then the behavior returned shortly thereafter. I even went outdoors to see if there would be any changes, and there was a noticeable change for this because their behavior wasn't as unruly as before, and a good portion of the students, namely the girls, were able to do the assignments. However, there were still moments where there were disruptions in the class that involved the boys on the most part. This happened for about 2 months, March and April to be exact. One thing that I did notice was the fact that many of the students made similar comments about being able to relax because they could hear the sounds of nature. Now, this didn't seem to make a difference in the boys, though. Unfortunately, due to the outdoor activities of other classes, we had to return to the inside of the school and back to our original room. The thought of having to deal with the original behavior with the boys and girls was a nightmare within itself, and an incentive to quickly research another method to quiet them down and to get them to focus. Keeping the comments in my mind regarding sound caused me to explore the aspect of sound more in this setting. I decided to run an observational experiment in their natural classroom setting. Confounding variables were significantly reduced because we were in the original classroom with no added elements, except for one. a CD player was introduced in the setting, and it only played classical music and instrumental New Age music, specifically composers such as Bach, Beethoven, Chopin, and Mozart. Other styles of music were omitted, especially anything involving vocals. The idea behind this was that if they have any reason to dance or sing to anything, that this would increase the probability of them losing their focus and returning to the original behavior. The added reason for this, as well as a contributing factor in including the specific music genres, was due to past experiences where cars could be heard outside blasting their radios with dance, pop, metal, rap, and other genres, and the kids would quickly start dancing and singing along. This was taken into account and caused me to ponder the notion of getting them to react to sound in a different way. Now outside they commented on the peaceful sounds of nature, so peaceful music was then chosen. The volume of the CD player was also set to a neutral level. This was done deliberately to get their attention, in the sense that in the midst of them talking, they would start to hear something that was new in their normal environment, and it would cause them to curiously explore it. Sure enough, as they entered the classroom, they began to misbehave. The music was then played, and in a matter of less than 3 minutes, the classroom went completely silent. I was able to talk to them and instruct them on their assignments. If they needed help, they raised their hands, and they were helped. Many of them completed their assignments and actually started other portions of homework, or found books, or other written tasks. Most important was the fact that this radical change was seen in both the girls and the boys. To test this idea further, I included other days when I didn't play the CD player, and the original behavior soon returned. One of those particular times, a few of the students requested the music to be played and went on to tell me that it was helping them to focus on their schoolwork. A number of the students also went on to learning to actually play the instruments. The results of their work on the whole reflected significant improvements in their behavioral patterns due to the inclusion of music in their environment. The independent variable was the music in the CD player and exclusion of it, and the dependent variable was the results of their completing the coursework or not. This study was done with 4 other groups in elementary schools and yielded very similar results. The factorial design was used in this study because there were more than 2 variables. Due to my personal research, I do believe that specific types of sounds like those in nature and classical music can have an effect on brain activity in regards to completing a task like homework or not completing the task. I also believe that in the overall picture, this research as well as the previous research discussed in this video strongly suggests that there is enough data to reject the null hypothesis also presented earlier in this presentation.